get email on my phone and all the good stuff.
Right.
Like, he's like,
I
yeah,
did
do
not
this
know that.
instead. And your iPad and things. I'm like, okay, I'm on board. Let's do it.
Of interest, yes, exactly.
Oh, you got that thing?
Everybody can
So now I get all the emails I'm supposed to be. I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
look at the interesting points.
there's all this
Well,
Maybe
I just one
and
email
everybody
per,
was listening
3
heard at
weeks.
that time, but we do not need to do that every
So you
time.
can have like a structure, and then
Yes.
in a given report, if you think there's something else to call
Of
out.
interest.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, let's do
that.
it. That sounds good.
So you still have 1 minute, so.
I think your eyes is this one. Thank you. Okay, this one's mine. Okay, thank you.
Everybody got so quiet early today.
I didn't have it on the phone yet. So it wasn't on the distribution list for trustees. Pat fixed it. So now I'm getting all the stuff I'm supposed to do. Interesting. Well, I have, so, yeah, I have my work here.
All right. All right. Are we ready? Ready?
Yes.
All right, 7 o'clock. All right, good evening. Welcome to this October 23rd, 2023 meeting of the Village of Western Springs Village Board of Trustees. To honor our nation's heroes and especially to honor the individuals who serve and protect our community, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Clerk Timmick, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes, President Rudolph. Trustee Bacon.
Here.
Trustee Chen.
Here.
Trustee Fink.
Here.
Trustee Lewis.
Here.
Trustee Naraki.
Here.
Trustee Terrell.
Here.
All present.
Thank you very much. Citizen comments. I don't think we have anybody here, and nothing has come in. Okay, very good, thank you. All right, terrific. Well, we will move on then to our capital infrastructure plan update. We're at the 90% update, and we have our representatives here from Baxter and Woodman, and really looking forward to this. And it's pretty exciting to be at 90%. Deputy Manager Bernanke, do you want to open us up?
Sure. Thank you, President Rudolph. Yeah, so we have Baxter and Woodman here tonight. They're the village's consultant that has helped us develop the capital infrastructure plan. You may recall earlier this year they visited for the 30% update, then it came back with a 60% update. Now they're here again for the 90% update. So I don't want to take up too much of their time. They have all the details. And we'll be here to answer questions along the way. I'll chime in from time to time, but Carolyn Greaves and Rich Gallis are here from Baxter to get us started.
All right, thank you so much. Microphone's on. You hear me good? A little closer. You go. Like that. All right, well, good evening. Thank you so much for inviting us here tonight to give the update. We're really excited to share a lot of hard work and a lot of collaboration with the village to be able to provide this update. We were here last Thursday for the Infrastructure Commission meeting. We got some great feedback from that. So things are a little different. If you were here last Thursday, you'll see some tweaks. But otherwise, I'm going to take you through this, and Rich and I are going to share where we're at on this update. But I will say, as we were starting this update, I did want to take just a little small step back, since it has been a couple months since we've been here in front of the board, and just do a little bit of a reminder again on some of the major components that we've been evaluating with this study. So I'm going to be talking in maybe two kind of frameworks. One is our linear infrastructure, so that's water, sewer, roads, sidewalks, and lighting, and fiber. And then our vertical infrastructure, so that's our buildings, and we're going to be digging into both of those as we go. And just as a quick reminder, about 40% of the village's water mains and sewer system are about 100 years old. So that really sets the stage of why we're trying to take a look at this now and start being forward thinking on how to manage this infrastructure that is aging. Another reminder for everyone is we set this evaluation up by looking at a risk-based evaluation. So if you recall, when we talked last time, for every main in town, for every sewer in town, for every road in town, we came up with a risk of failure score. That risk of failure is based on the likelihood of something failing, and that could be the condition, the age, some other additional information along those lines, as well as the consequence of something failing. What is it close to? Is it near the railroad? Is it near a school? Is it near some key area where we need to provide service? So those two components were combined to create a risk of failure score for every component of your linear infrastructure that we're going to talk about today. We came up with a different methodology for the building structure, and we're going to be talking about that too as we go. But I thought it'd be worth just taking a little bit of a step back as a reminder. So as we scroll through these maps, you'll see this is a summary of the risk of failure for the water supply system. And anything in red or orange or yellow has a higher risk than anything in the dark greens or the light greens. Another quick reminder on the sewer system. Anything, again, in the reds has a higher risk of failure versus the greens and the lighter yellows. And then finally, on the roads, again, similar color palette. Anything in those darker, deep reds, darker oranges, those have the higher risk versus the greens and the light greens. So why I wanted to mention that is because this is about where we left off last time, is sharing this risk of failure. Since then, we've taken all of these components and essentially overlap them with each other. Start looking at where there are trends for needs within the infrastructure system. So before we go into that, I did want to take another little bit of a step back to remind us all of the resident survey that we did here for this analysis. So we did take a look last week as we were prepping for this presentation. Residents are still continuing to add in commentary and feedback. As of October 17th, 445 residents have provided input on this survey, which we were all thrilled by. And this has become really important data for us as we move forward with the evaluation, because we want to make sure we're taking the survey information into consideration as we're moving forward with this recommendation. So you'll see here on this screen is a little bit of a summary of where the survey results occurred. And just by using some hotspot data, so these little bit of warmer blue areas, you can see where there were comments on water. You can see here a little bit of a shift when I click on sewer, where there were comments on sewer. And again, a little bit of a shift moving again for the road comments. So I want to point out two things that are really important to point out. One, you'll see there's a pretty big hotspot here around Village Hall. That is not because people were having necessarily comments for this area. It's just that they didn't put their home address in, so it defaulted to the Village Hall address. The second thing is, it's important to note that just because there is a comment doesn't necessarily mean it was a negative comment. So we read through each and every one of these comments as we were looking through this to identify again where the trends were of comments, whether some of the comments were thanks for doing the study, and some of the comments were I'm looking forward to seeing some of the recommendations. So keeping that in mind, while we're seeing all these trends doesn't necessarily mean every one of these comments was a negative comment. So I want to move forward to what we've been doing since we last talked, and I've got a very colorful map here, so I just want to point out two aspects for you. So as I mentioned before, we took all of those risk scores for all of the horizontal infrastructure and overlapped them digitally into the village's GIS, which is the tool we're using for this evaluation. So once we do that, this becomes a very colorful map, but there's a couple things to highlight that will help us understand and move forward. Anything that's in the warmer tones, so the oranges, the reds, those are projects where we have at least 3 infrastructure types that start overlapping with higher risk needs. Anything that's in the cooler tones, which is the blue and the green, that's where we don't have as much of that overlap of risk. So this starts helping us see the trends where there are the possibilities to use village money more effectively by looking at projects that could have multiple components in on them and setting that stage for identifying those project locations moving forward. So I also want to just bring back again those survey results. As you can see where we have those warmer red tones, we are seeing kind of some clusters of survey results. Again, here on the south side of the village. We did notice there's quite a few survey results up here where I just said the cooler tones were less of a risk. And when we did dig into what those results were, they were more on commentary on whether people wanted sidewalk or not. So some of these areas where we're seeing these pockets of not necessarily projects, we did double check on what those comments were because we wanted to make sure, did we miss something? Was there something that somebody commented on that we didn't catch in our assessment? So we did go back and fact check every single comment on some of those areas in the cooler tone areas. And again, where we had the warmer tones, those comments really did represent what the recommendations are starting to guide us towards. So we found there was a really great parallel to the two projects. So as I move through here now, I'm going to say that once we did that overlap of all of those recommendations, we took a look at what all of those risk scores, but the top 15% risk scores, how they start sum up into different types of projects. So what I'm going to show you here again is another very colorful map of all project locations that have the highest 15% of the risk scores. So I'm going to take us through this a little bit because I know there's a lot of different colors here. So I mentioned at the beginning our number one priority was to try to overlap as many linear infrastructure projects as possible. So when we do this, where there's need for water, sewer, and road, you can see that this becomes a map that identifies these locations of higher risk scores. So that became kind of our driving force, looking at where we could see the biggest bang for the buck. But that being said, there still are some higher risk scores of other types of projects that we wanted to make sure we were taking a look at and incorporating in our overall assessment. So we started to look at some different categories. So categories where just water and sewer are needed are shown here in this light blue. And these may be areas that where we could put the water outside of the roadway or the sewer improvements outside the roadway. And we won't have to impact the roadway for necessary improvements. Another category we took a look at was water and road. So here's a couple areas where we know we have some needs for water as well as some needs for road. So we can take a look at that as a priority. Another category was just sewer and road. So the water is in good shape, but we have a higher risk for both the sewer and the roadway. And then last but not least, we took a look at where just standalone projects may be, where right now we're not seeing a high risk of other infrastructure needs, but where just some higher risk water improvements may be located. We got a little bit around town. Some higher risk sewer only projects may be located, as well as just standalone higher risk road projects. So there's a lot of layers, a lot of data that went into where this is at. And right now you're probably thinking, great, but so what? Well, I would like to share now the next step. So we took a look at this and took a look at what some projects that the village has already been focusing on and came up with what we established as, oh, sorry, I got a little more excited. I wanted to jump to that up straight away. And just as a reminder, I pulled back the survey results again, so you can see how the survey results are again overlapping where some of these recommended projects are. So again, utilizing that tool to help guide us and move us forward. Oh, there we go, that'll help. Good? All right. I didn't touch anything, honest. All right. Hopefully that helps a lot so you can hear me better. So now I want to talk what we decided to identify some examples of some higher priority projects where we started clustering projects together to take a look at what some of these areas that the village might want to look at a little bit more closely. So there's a couple things I want to emphasize as we did this. So one thing is we took a look at not just these projects, but what we call additional design considerations. So I mentioned right now you saw a lot of water sewer road. But as we looked at these higher priority projects, we took a look at whether or not there was a lighting need, whether or not there was a need to maybe fill in some of the sidewalk area, whether or not there was a need to replace lead services. That's a project that the village is undergoing right now, taking a look at getting money for lead service improvements on the water side. And then, what else am I missing? Road, sidewalk, lighting, streetscape. And took a look if there was a streetscape opportunity. So all of those, what I will call additional design considerations, were added into each of these projects in terms of identifying an estimated capital cost. So we also took a look at whether or not there could be a possibility for adding some sustainable solutions. So one example here is, could we add permeable pavers in an area where there is some potential improvements for recommendations? We looked at lining versus replacement. So maybe there's an opportunity to save on some construction costs. This is just, again, at high level. We really are saying we're establishing some high level project costs here, knowing that as the village identifies what their next needs are, working with village staff, we can drill into those project costs a little bit further.
Yeah, just to
Yep.
make a point, to expand on that a little bit, as we go from 90 to 100, I think once we've identified projects that we collectively agree that are vital to the community, I think at that point in time, we can introduce more sustainable ideas as we can create that final message.
So I just want to touch on a couple of the sample higher priority projects here, and you'll see there's a symbol for the water treatment plant. When we started this analysis, there was always the goal to do a similar analysis of the needs of the water treatment plant, and that was decided to be scheduled for next year to go through and take a look at that equipment. That plant's been in service 15 plus years now. Well, the existing equipment has
Yeah,
been.
just a little over 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to add to Carolyn's point, we initially looked at the water plant as just another building we could review as part of this project, but, very quickly we realized it's very unique, especially the equipment that's inside of it. That with our wells, it puts us in a place where just a building review wouldn't give us really what we need for that building, which is a real deep look at how we treat our water, the equipment there, and replacement of that equipment at some point. So you'll see shortly here in the proposed 2024 budget, we are looking to do a potential second phase to this, to add the water plant, the wells, and our system in general and its redundancy. And it's a pretty high priority, I think. So we'll talk about that a little bit more during the budget, but it's certainly something we want to add to this as like a phase.
So that's why that is listed as one of the projects in here. In addition, if I go in, and again, this is utilizing your GIS, so this is why this is really exciting. So this builds a tool that you can work on, village staff can work on, you can share with your village residents. If I click on one of these projects, I now get a summary of the estimated components of what comes into the total estimated construction costs. So this particular project on Hillgrove and Burlington, we identified water needs, sewer, roadway, streetscape, and then some lighting replacements as some needs here. So this, again, as you look forward to sharing this tool with your residents, they'll be able to click on a project and see what some of the major components are that go into the cost estimates for this. Another example, and I have to thank the village president for this because she pointed this out on Thursday night, we came up with a recommendation for projects on Fair Elm Avenue. That was really preliminary, driven by water, sewer, and roadway needs. But we mentioned before, we've talked about sidewalks in this meeting before, that there would really be potential opportunities to fill in missing sidewalk or not. That'd be something that you would decide per project. So I went back and took a look at this, and let's see if I can get the filter to work. Gotta love it. There we go. So I went back and took a look at this, and I'm gonna zoom in here, try to explain what we're looking at. On this project on Fair Elm, anything that is shown with the heavy line is where there is no existing sidewalk. I'll zoom in just a little bit more. Anything that's shown as a gap, there is sidewalk. So this is an example of where there's some, but then there's not. And there's some and where there's not. So we know that this is gonna be a decision that's gonna be important for every project, but for planning purposes, right now, we went back in and calculated where the missing sidewalk was to add that cost in. So at least you have that number for making that decision for a project.
Can I ask a quick question? So,
Yeah.
like the red one that you had before, when it was Burlington and Hillgrove, is that all, the whole red with all the little lines in the
Yes.
middle, or is that just one side?
It's all both sides.
Okay.
It's all one project. And again, I will emphasize too, and when I show you the dollars, you'll agree with me on this. Right now, we're showing them as one project because it made sense to make those connections. But the likelihood is, or the recommendation is, you may look at phasing, breaking these projects down into different approaches. But in terms of calculating what the need is, it made sense to put these together as singular projects. But you may have parts, break those down to like phase A, phase B.
And I wanted to add too, as Carolyn mentioned before, these are examples of high priority projects. The
Mhm.
first map, the one above this that showed all the nice colors, really showed that top 15% of high risk areas that projects are being outlined for. So this is a sample size of that. This isn't necessarily saying this is planning means the most critical, first projects we should do. Every project, every year as we get into our budget cycle and we get into future planning, we'll look at projects that are outlined in this plan and at our budget. We'll look at staff recommendations, board recommendations, community feedback, and make decisions on projects as we do now on an annual basis. So this isn't saying these are the projects we'll do first, it's just a sample size.
Exactly, thank you, Casey. And this other example I have down here as for Ridgewood, you'll see it says Ridgewood Area C. As we were going through and looking at the risk of failure, we were able to break down several different projects. So there's, this would be maybe the first phase of several as you start planning those improvements and seeing what's most critical as you're moving forward. So I think I've mentioned this a couple times. I'll just hit on it one more time before I show you costs, because I know that's where everyone's eyeballs want to go next. But is that this really did build a tool that is live and usable for the village. As you upgrade your PCI ratings in whatever X amount of years you do that, you'll be able to see where you've made improvements and where your recommendations still need to go. This is a tool that you can continue to use and evolve for the village and your capital needs.
And I'll add too that this isn't just a village staff only document. This is on our village website. So anyone can go to our page, wsprings.com/capital plan, and click the link. It's the first link at the top of the page, and you're able to see exactly what Carolyn's going through today. Click on all the items, zoom in, zoom out, turn on filters, turn off filters. So as we continue to get closer to the 100%, this gets updated as well. And then as we as staff make those updates to data, like when Matt and his team do the annual roadway review, that data goes into your live too. So those updates will continuously be live. It's more of a dynamic plan than something that's static.
Thanks, Casey. Anything else, Rich?
Just one small footnote, the other thing to think about is when you build projects like this, you wouldn't do 100 feet of a road, stop, and then, leave that another 100-foot section if it was in maybe better condition. So if you go out and you drive at some of these, you'll look, you say, well, that road looks okay, but we try to do projects also that make sense. So something that sits on top of this is engineering judgment, and doing constructability judgment as well. So just keep that in mind when you look at these projects and others as well.
This is why we're a good team, because you reminded me of that. That was great. So actually, if you look at this project here, the Springdale project, this is a great example. So if you really want to start pouring through this data and you go back to the maps above, there is a little, this, I think is this block, had a little bit of a lower risk rating. It wasn't as high maybe as some of the other blocks. But because we're here, we're doing the projects, it made sense to include it in the project. So we really did make some of those decisions to pull over some of those additional areas. All right, I'm gonna show the costs now. So we went through and identified, like I mentioned, all of the major components: water, sewer, road. One other item I'm gonna share before I show you those numbers is, so we utilize, couple items, we utilize current bid prices from the village to establish a typical cost per typical improvement. So if it was a water only, we had a cost. If it was a water sewer road, we had a different type of cost. Then we back check that against other costs that we're seeing in the region, making sure we're using numbers that are making sense for planning. So we spent some time working with village staff on that to be able to identify numbers that we could apply to the different types of projects we have here. We also added a contingency and we added an engineering design and construction percentage to each cost. You may not need that as you dive into some of the projects. You know, staff might do the job. As you narrow down costs, you might not need the contingency. But at this planning level, we wanted to make sure we had those numbers in there, so you could use that for moving forward. So right now, so as an example of the high priority kind of example cost projects here, you can see I have an estimate of a total cost. And then our breakdown, like we mentioned before: water, sewer, roads, sidewalk, streetscape, and lighting. Again, these are all components. As you dig into the project, you may or may not need. You may choose to do something a little bit different, but it gives you a start for planning. I mentioned before that we did include lead services, and that was when we were looking at our total project. But when I came down to breaking down these detailed ones, I didn't include the lead service replacement costs at this time because I know the village is going after some funding for that, and we wanted to kind of wait and see how that funding moved forward. That may be another line item that we add in here when we get to that 100%. Any questions? I just covered a lot of material in a relatively short time period. Any questions on what we've done so far, what the analysis is showing, and the general direction of some of the recommendations?
Could you just break down, for example, like let's just take the most high-priced one here, Hillgrove and Burlington, $14 million. How does that break down as to what would be done?
Right, so that is replacing water, replacing sewer, reconstruction of road. One thing I wanted to point out is whenever we did a road reconstruction, it's reconstruction with concrete road because that's the village's policy. That is putting in streetscaping in that area, and that's replacing lighting for more efficient lighting. Back to the sustainable solutions, so that's actually more energy efficient lighting and will improve the lighting of the area.
Basically, it's water, road, and sewer.
Yeah.
And that would be for really all these projects?
Yeah, some of them don't have the road, some of them don't have sewer. Some areas just didn't have that need, so you can utilize the table, or you can utilize, clicking on the projects like I was showing you before. When you want to have some time to play around and dig into this. But at this point in time, we really tried to combine, again, the most bang for the buck, doing as many projects together in a project. But there were some other areas where we just felt there was a high enough priority, such as a water main replacement, that we wanted to make sure that you included. So like Casey mentioned, these are sample projects at this time. We are looking forward to having a really detailed workshop with village staff to dive into each of these jobs and say, does this project make sense based on your knowledge of the area? And I think one example is when we did our first test run here of this data, we identified a road project that was needed, and then Matt said, oh, we're doing that project this year. Great, the system works. So it was some good input for us to make sure that we're on the right track. So we're looking forward to having that really detailed workshop after we get your input here tonight.
So this kind of data and risk assessment and cost estimates are kind of unlike anything we've had in the past. To have it all together, sort of this thorough, this comprehensive. So this is a huge, huge step for us. And I know we are 90% done, but it really, this is amazing to me that this becomes then this dynamic tool that we'll be able to keep using. So, I mean, congratulations to everybody who's worked on this. Having this kind of data available for us it really puts us in a really much improved position.
What would what would the shelf life be on this? 10 years, 15 years?
Ready to jump in, so I'm gonna let him do
You mean
that.
the shelf life of like the cost estimate?
Yeah, I mean, just going with
Yeah.
what President Rudolph said, that I'm thinking that later boards will pull off of this, but how long?
Sure.
I understand that the cost will go up with inflation, but as far as being able to take a look at this and say, here's our priorities.
Sure. Yeah, like with any data, we as staff have to manage this regularly. So if we want the tool to continue working, we have to make sure we're updating cost estimates, unit prices from year to year. Again, a lot of the stuff that we're doing now, like Director Super's roadway inventory, is already done in GIS. So, we can link that straight to here. And then it'll take some review by staff on an annual basis to make sure everything's up to date. But one of the major goals of this was to make sure we left the dynamic tool to keep using.
I have a question, and I know I'm newer, but so how many years out, like how much money do you have a year on roads? Or how much do we have a year
Great
on roads?
question.
Like I see if we want to do all these projects, it's $61 million. So is that a 10-year plan? Is that
Right, and
what does that mean?
yeah, that's something we've been talking about over the last few days of how do we put this in context?
Right.
Right. So for us to just hear $61 million, you're like, is that high? Is it low?
Right.
Sounds like a lot, right? But what have we? I think what we're going to work on putting together is what we have been spending on each of these categories, and what are the sources of the funding for each of the categories
Okay.
over the last, maybe 10 years.
Which I'm learning a little bit about the different sources, but if we're going
Right.
to try to explain this, like if we're going to re-vote on something and talk to
Right.
people out there.
Right. But a big part of this, we historically, a large part of infrastructure funding, it results in the roads, and that has been historically through roadway referendums, which we have done, every few years. So that has been a historical component of funding, along with other sources, which again, we'll need to get all of the data so that we can all see all this to understand it. But we do know from this that our funding over the years and the projects over the years haven't kept up with now where we are with respect to the need, right? So this is what we're really seeing here. It is a lot, but I think we all need to have a better understanding of how much of a lot is this, right? Like what is the context? Do we normally spend $4 million a year? And so therefore, if we kept at the current pace, this is going to be 61 divided by 4.
And the roads are going to sink, and we're all going to get our cars swallowed up
Right.
by the road.
Right, so we need
Not a
to
good idea.
think of a better plan.
Yeah.
Right. But that's, now that we have all of this data in this kind of format and all this inputs, we can combine it with and look back at what we've spent and where the funds have come from. Going forward, look at all of our different funding options, look under every rock, every opportunity that we might have with resident input and tolerance, right? And see what we can put together, what kind of priorities, and over what time frame is really now what our next steps are.
Our hope as a staff is to have that combined with the 100% plan to you by January. So we'll be continuing to work on that. And hopefully we can have this all wrapped up together so that it gives the board something to talk about at your next big strategic plan meeting and all of those things as we prepare for another referendum and other things that go into funding these types of projects.
Quick question. how you reflect completion of projects? Will there be like at the very end of the report, a project completion page that will, since it's a living document, sort of track progress and show dollars invested, back into the community?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one we haven't 100% thought about. Honestly, as we update the ratings, so the roadway is a good example again. I'll go back to the roadway ratings. Whenever we finish a roadway project, the roadway rating could have been a 20, I'll use any number of 20 saying that's in bad condition. As bad as you do their evaluation the next year, usually gets changed to a 0 or a 1 or whatever the condition might be, and that itself will reflect itself on the map. You'll see that rating drop down for the roadway piece. That's pretty much something you don't have to worry about. But creating a completed project page is a great example, or a great idea. So it's something we'll keep in mind.
Yeah, because if you're not clued into where we were,
Yeah.
when a street road project goes from 10 to 1, a trustee 3 years from now may not notice that, or the public may not notice that.
And just to elaborate just a little bit on that, we have internally have a tool when we track something similar with dashboard GIS for our roadway program stuff. So, as Casey mentioned, we can track those MPCI ratings. We're not tracking it by dollars right now, we're tracking it by conditions, and you can see that when we do improvement program. We actually had, I guess like an export of that tool in a way. The last referendum we did, we actually, as part of the documentation for the community, showcased the roads that we projected from the first referendum and then the roads that were actually completed from the first referendum. So I would anticipate that we would have some sort of similar tool to that as well.
Nice.
Can I ask about the water category? So the water component is both the water mains and delivery of water from the water plant, but is it also comprise the stormwater management?
So stormwater is combined into the sewer component.
Okay, so the stormwater is the sewer. Okay.
Yeah, good question.
That's what I thought, but.
That's a really good question.
question.
Which also explains why there's so much of the color on the sewer-only map.
Okay.
And sewer is both sanitary sewer and stormwater.
I know, so I was like, I don't know if that's.
So would that mean with all the colors that that's usually where it's not separated? Is that where the color is showing up as the most intense?
So I can actually show you that. So this is why this is great to have this here at hand. So we do have a map that shows you where the area is. So this is your sewer mapping. I'll try to make it a little bit bigger for you. I know it's a little small. So anything that's green is sanitary only. Anything that's orange is storm only, and then anything is brown is combined.
Okay. Oh, that's helpful.
Okay. I was just thinking about our funding source, the stormwater utility fee. But I guess, yeah, it's a big category.
It is. It
Very
is.
large category. Okay.
And one thing I wanted to add before turning this over to Rich to talk about the buildings is, with those recommendations that we shared here tonight on the priority projects, the sample projects, every project in town that had a rating, we created a cost for, an estimated cost. So we have a mega spreadsheet beyond spreadsheets that we'll be sharing with village staff and the village at the end of this, so you'll be able to use that to help, once you start projecting and moving some of the projects into the future, you'll be able to take that and work with it too.
That's the brain behind all the colors.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, wow.
With the map too, I think this is wonderful that it's online and available to residents because, I mean, myself as a resident, I can't wait to click further into my own block.
Great.
Right? That it provides everybody the chance to
Yes.
see kind of what the impacts are
Yes.
in their specific block or in their general area or on their route to school, whatever it might be. This really is an excellent tool. Very much like I liked the tree tool as well, that it allows the residents the opportunity to drill into it. So it's a great service.
Great, glad to hear that. All right, I'd like to shift a little bit into buildings. This was another major component of this. Rich, do you want me to steer?
Yeah, that'd be
Okay,
great.
I'll move that towards you.
So when we began the capital improvement project, we had a vision of really trying to take and evaluate our facilities here in town and tie that closely with all of the other infrastructure that the village possesses. And so we started off on that mission, and what we found quickly is that the needs of the what we'll call the horizontal utility infrastructure far outweighed the needs of the facilities. So as we got into that process, we made a conscious effort to decouple the two. Henceforth, while we're sort of talking about it somewhat differently here this evening. As we got into this, Williams Architects is our partner. They had some other partners there that specialize in heating and air conditioning systems, structural systems, and other components of facilities. As an architectural firm, their focus is oftentimes just in the facility and how it behaves, but some of their consultants also took deep dives into the structural components of each one of the facilities. Again, what we quickly learned when we started to go into a deep dive into evaluating the facilities is that the facilities are in pretty good condition. There are some things that were discovered during that evaluation process that we'll recommend and share with you here this evening. But on balance, again, the needs of the facilities were somewhat less than the needs of the horizontal utilities. And again, you can put those two things on a scale. The facilities are much smaller. You've got much more pipe in the ground. You've got much more roadway network, and you've got a lot of other infrastructure that's out there outside of the facilities. The one thing that I want to make sure that I drive home tonight is, although there are some very specific needs in each one of these facilities, again, nothing really rose to being on par with some of the needs of the utilities. Maybe we can take a quick look here at the Village Hall just to use that as an example to kind of walk you through what we found. In this facility, there wasn't any significant structural defects. There wasn't HVAC systems. They work fine. In general, the building is in pretty good condition given its age. But there were some things that were noted in here that resulted in projects that would be recommended. For example, the one that really comes to mind is the police facilities. The current conditions of the police facilities within this building are inadequate. And I think we talked about this last time, that the lockup in particular, when someone is apprehended, the police department has to sometimes work with adjacent communities to handle those folks that are going to be incarcerated for whatever reasons. And so the shortcomings of the police facilities really rose to the top in terms of the need for this facility for some enhancements. And with that comes improvements that need to be considered. Some other things that were noted, this is not completely, doesn't always rise to the current standards for ADA, for Americans with Disabilities Act. Although much of the facility complies, and it doesn't always match exactly where we would want to be today with the current standards. But in terms of code, it complies with code. And I think that's always really the important things. We look at life safety and we look at code. And in this facility, everything complies with current code. If you make enhancements or you want to change things in the facility, at that time, you would have to meet the current code or the new code. And that's where ADA would apply. But again, as the facility exists today, although not perfect, we comply with our current code. So after we go through a variety of these different projects, we assemble some costs for each one of the buildings in a similar fashion as we did with this facility. And we arrive at just under $8.5 million worth of projects that would be recommended. Again, no life safety matters, no significant code issues, just matters that would improve the overall staff experience and resident experience within the facilities that we do have. One footnote to this entire process here, the one thing that really is something to consider for the future, one recommendation that's somewhat universal to all of the facilities that we looked at, is to consider a space needs study. Space needs studies, they take a look at finance sitting here and community development here, and is there a better way to, configure those folks such that it makes better use of everybody's time, and that you get some synergies within the departments that most interact with one another. So as a footnote to all of that, I think one recommendation that the architect has encouraged us to consider, or you to consider, is to consider a space needs study to evaluate how to best position your people, and whether or not there's things you could do within the facility to just make it a better experience for not only the public, but the staff as well.
Questions on buildings? And each of these you can drill into to get that complete cost estimate, like you just showed that example.
Yeah, the projects that we generated, I mean, they're similar to the ones we talked about last time. This is just the next step in the process where we've added costs that you would expect if you want to proceed with some of those enhancements.
So I wanted to just touch on next steps. Like previously mentioned, our goal is to get this to you by January. We're looking forward to incorporating feedback from you tonight and from last Thursday into this evaluation, and then having that deep dive, project workshop with village staff in November, so that we can finalize the recommendations for the projects, and then you have this tool to work with to start making some plans. Excuse me.
Any other questions, comments?
I'm looking forward to looking at it more after this, since it's online. There's a lot of information here to digest.
Will you have a time element, like how long a certain project would take? You have that in there, or?
How long a certain project would take to complete, or?
Yeah, I mean, let's just say we're trying to decide, okay, of these 6 hot ones, which one is needed?
Yeah.
But which one would be most cost efficient and time efficient?
Sure. Yeah, not necessarily in here. That would be more of a year-to-year planning piece for staff. It's all going to depend on budget. We can support the cost of the project in all those categories, as well as community feedback, board feedback, staff recommendations. So it's really something that it would be difficult to outline in here if we don't know what our revenue sources are today. So we'll have to tackle that year by year.
But something like the one that you highlighted before, the Hillgrove, Burlington area, the 14 million, I see what you're saying, which is like, does that take a year to complete that, everything that's in it, or is that 3 years to complete that $14 million?
Yeah, the scope of the project, you mean?
Yeah.
The individual project. It really depends. That one's pretty big. Jeff might be able to talk a little bit about that.
But just in general too, right? For each of those, it is like by order of magnitude, should we just use the cost to make us think the higher the cost, the longer it would take? Or does it just depend on the elements of the cost?
Well, along that same line, like, I just live on Central, so like all that work that did on Central that was in 2 different parts, 2 different seasons, weather came in, and that was only sewer, right?
Sewer and road.
Sewer and road.
And road, well, yeah, sorry. But this was sewer, road, and water, and flowers, and lights.
Some of them.
So
yep.
it's probably, I mean, just based on how many blocks long it is, that's gotta be 2 to 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's going to take some time, but, phasing, scope, everything is going to play a role. Like Central Avenue, we didn't necessarily have a requirement that they had to get that project completed in 6 months. But you can throw additional resources and cruise at it. It costs a little bit more. There's a balance there. Given that specific project, the sensitivity, we have to have a pretty good plan in place to make sure that whatever we're doing is going to get the job done right the first time and it's being done in an efficient manner.
And you'll have to shut down part of town.
Right.
That'll be tricky.
So that's kind of a tough question to answer right now, but a lot of factors will depend. Everything we piece together in there is once we have, we know there's a need there now. I mean, we knew there was a need, but now we kind of have a number. We have to further refine it and piece together something that, on top of all the other projects. So, plenty of work ahead for us.
And one thing I did want to point out, which I might not have hit on hard before, was some of these projects, in particular the sewer area, we are recommending some additional study. Sewer is a little bit harder sometimes to identify a detailed project at this level. But we did put in an estimate for lining a sewer, just to have a budget price in some of these. So again, as we give you those details for these recommended projects, we'll have that component. So you'll have noticed here, excuse me, that we had this comment of construction/study, knowing that they're probably gonna have to take a little bit of a deeper look at some of these elements, but we do have a budget cost that you could work with it.
Is it most of staff's opinion that you would want to take care of downtown first?
No, that estimated project list is by no means a priority list for us. It's really just a snapshot of some of the projects outlined in that really big map. Carolyn, if you want to scroll back up. It's really just grabbing some projects from the top 15% and getting us an idea of what those look like, what they cost. So we're by no means prioritizing any projects right now that are on the list.
These are higher risk projects though, and that's why they rose to the top.
So I know when I first started as a trustee, one of the projects they were talking about is Central Avenue. So it kind of took at least 4 years of planning to get Central Avenue done. So between having to find funding for these things and the planning of this, so are we talking like these projects are still like 5 years out?
Yeah, I would say
5 or 6 maybe even?
I would say a number of these projects are a significant amount of time out, mainly because of the funding sources.
Sure.
We don't have funding lined up for this scale of project on an annual basis for all of these categories, which is going to be a key component of the next steps. We really need to find a funding solution, and as President Rudolph mentioned before, referendums have been our go-to for large-scale projects on an annual basis. We're not alone there. A lot of municipalities around us in the area use referendums. We're a non-home rule bedroom community, so we have to ask the question to the voters if we want to issue what's called the general obligation bonds, which is a fancier name for what we say is referendum. And if voted yes, then we would have access to those dollars. But it's been our tried and true method, and it really is one of the only methods we have to fund something this large.
Director Mastandona, do you want to talk a little bit about how the bonds work and just briefly what our capacity is?
Yes, so our debt margin limits is set by state statute. It's about 8.6% of EAV, so it could fluctuate each year. And currently, at the end of 2022, we had about 56 million available to us. To issue that amount of debt, you would still have to go through the referendum process, but as at the end of 2022, that was our available debt margin. That besides the EAV going up and down as we pay off some of the debt we already have, it increases that amount available to us.
And you typically do 10-year, 20-year loans?
They're 20.
20.
Yes, and we did one in 2008 and 2016 that was referenced earlier for the roadway. The 2008 was 6.5 million, and the 2016 was 12 million, and all those have been fully expended at this point.
For the referendum that we just did in 2000, what was the wording? Because it was roadway, but could we also use the funds for under roadway? I can't remember. I know we've gone over this. Just roadway.
The last two have just been set just a roadway.
So we got the funding for the under, like the sewer and the water from
from a variety of sources. In some
Okay.
cases, we use IUPA loans over on Clausen Avenue in
Okay.
particular. In other cases, we use the water sewer rate when it could support it. But it's a significant cost. It's expensive, and we can't typically raise funds needed for a water main project or a sewer project annually. It's tough to do that with our current rates. So we have to get creative and use whatever funding source we can at the time. But yeah, the 12 million and the 6.5 million referendums can only be used for roadway improvements.
And I would like to also just add that also creates a big challenge of efficiency and effectiveness. If you have a lot of this
Yeah.
roadway money, you're sometimes searching of how you could do the piping or the water main underground, and we've ran into situations where we weren't able to. So then you run the risk of having to open up a fresh road just to fix a water main because the funding source wasn't there at the same time.
That to me seems one of the many benefits even of this analysis is it lets us see that kind of, it doesn't solve the funding problem, but at least it shows us where we have the greatest need for that. And it's a giant modeling spreadsheet here, right? To try to figure out how we get the funding for each of the areas so that we can map that out to be, I like your words, to be the most, efficient and effective with the funds there.
To John's point, I think one of the biggest frustrations from a staff standpoint is when we have a road that's deteriorating and we keep putting it off because we don't have the funds for what's underneath it. And so to handle the water and the sewer and the road at the same time on some of these projects that we've seen in the map would be, I'm sure, our village engineer's dream to be able to just fund that entire project and get it done. And I think having this tool will allow us to better articulate that as we go forward and talk to residents about a referendum and how an infrastructure referendum would benefit every area within the community. This is going to be very helpful.
So that is, I think, then also to Trustee Chen's question about the past referendums. Those referenda were specifically roadway.
They were.
But we can, there is the opportunity to do a different kind. That's the general obligation fund, bond? Is that what you're saying?
It would be for infrastructure.
So infrastructure.
Rather than just roadway.
You can do things all at once.
That's right. And projects that are independent will also be done, but when you have a project that needs all layers addressed, you would be able to do that through that same pot of funding through the referendum worded this way.
So we wouldn't be restricted, as we've just
That's right.
discussed from the past. Okay.
Is there any distinction financially to having these referendums for just roads as opposed to these?
It was just a decision made by the board at that time to address that as a roadway referendum.
Okay, the amount's going to be much larger when it's both, when it's all of those things combined.
Well, we're also going to understand
Yeah,
more
no,
that
I
you
mean,
need all
I
three.
know, I'm just saying, like, looks like the referendums. Oh, every community is in the same boat. Everybody
Right.
needs to upgrade their.
But we have to figure out the time horizon of this, because it is kind of a capacity question here, right? Like what is our collective and our resident tolerance and capacity? We don't have a lot of funding options, right? I mean, just as historically, we're a 95% residential community. So it's more challenging. But this is what we now have because of this data. Sorry, I keep talking about data because I love that we have this data, because it helps us to really look at this. It helps us to understand it, and it really helps us to communicate to our residents, and everybody can click through into that map. Everything in our whole village is touched somehow in this. And I hope that's what people can see. But regardless, we don't know if this is going to turn into something that takes, 5 years or takes 25 years.
This is a question for Mike. Remind me with these referendums, they have to be obviously very specific, but can we ask the villagers choices, like this one, this one, this one, or is it just yes or no?
Typically, the most clearest, simplest phrasing of the referendum question is the best. Sometimes the referendums are defined by the actual state law. You have to follow what's in the state law.
We'll give the villagers a choice. Well,
Yeah, you got to give them a choice, and it's always
but
better
it's a yes
to-
or no choice.
Typically, yes.
But it couldn't be, okay, this, we do this, it's gonna cost this much, and here's your property taxes increases. And this one, like, those sort of,
If you wanted to give people a menu, you could do like an advisory referendum to, where you have more latitude to script choices up, but again,
complicated.
the more complicated you make it, the less risk you have, more voter confusion.
But Trustee Terrell, to that point, it's a great point. And I think that kind of input, ideally, we'd get that
Yeah, we
in
get that
advance of a
beforehand.
referendum, that we would do that through other means, through
Citizen
focus
surveys.
groups, more
Publications,
surveys.
Open houses, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that we really want to take this opportunity with, again, my favorite
We'd be
word
able to
tonight,
do that
data.
Use it, right.
Yeah, that we can go and, again, and also to Trustee Avaking's point, now they can understand this better too, but we have to get the word out and discuss it and ask for that kind of input.
The Infrastructure Commission meeting was very interesting on Thursday, and one of the things that one of the commissioners, Sean Murphy, brought up was what the village allocates in the budget for maintenance. And I think we started off this evening with Carolyn telling us about the percentage of our infrastructure that's over 100 years old, and so we're playing catch-up. We know we're not going to solve this in the first 10 years of this, right? We're going to make decisions. The board will decide how much to allocate each year. But Commissioner Murphy asked a question about balancing our maintenance budget as well, and how do we make sure that we are continuing to maintain the proper level of our infrastructure annually, so that we never fall behind like this again. That, as we accomplish projects, we are able to continue to maintain that. So just this year alone, Director Supert's been really working hard on trying to look at how we are being more proactive with our infrastructure. And we hope to, over the next couple of months, take another hard look at both our operating money on the capital side for maintenance, as well as kind of the long-term planning of these larger capital projects that need to be done. So, keep in mind, there's both sides of that, how we maintain what we have in good shape today, as well as how we start accomplishing these projects that are not in such good shape. So you'll be hearing more about both the maintenance as well as the capital at our budget meetings coming up in November as well.
Anything else? Any other comments or feedback tonight?
As you play around with this over the coming weeks, please feel free to reach out to the directors, and they'll be getting in touch with Baxter regularly as we try to finalize the report. So please, if you see anything, or if you hear from residents in your areas who've taken a peek at it, encourage people to go look at it. What we're looking at tonight will be live by tomorrow morning?
Yes. Yeah, we'll push it out via the village website. And we already have an article of Power Topics that's prepped for this, so I'm happy that we did present it tonight, because Power Topics deadline is passed. So we'll have that available live as soon as possible. And then if you hear any feedback at all, even if it's something as simple as not understanding a definition or a term, let us know, because we want to make sure that this is as clear as possible to anyone from the public who's not as deep in the weeds as we are with the terminology day to day.
Again, this is great. Thank you, everybody, for the work on this, and it just really looks like just a terrific tool. I think it looks really intuitive for people to use. Again, everybody can see their own block and see their neighborhood. So thank you. Really, really great presentation.
Appreciate the feedback.
All right. Very good. Then we will move on to our next topic, which new business. We have a few status reports, and I think I will begin with Trustee Terrell on a couple of agreements.
Yes, the first status report is a resolution that will later be on the omnibus report tonight. It's authorizing and approving a labor agreement between the Village of Western Springs and Teamsters Local 700. This, as you know, is a 3-year contract, and I'm going to ask Casey if he can fill us in with some of the specific points that we discussed when we were in closed sessions that are now going to be open.
Thank you, Trustee Terrell. Yeah, I'm happy to update you all on some of the finer points of the proposed contract. So just for some background, if you recall, the village had a previous collective bargaining agreement with the Teamster 700 union. They represent our maintenance journeyman 1 and 2 positions at the Public Works Garage. We have 9 of those positions currently as of today, and that contract expired as of April of this year. So negotiations began shortly after that, and I'm happy to say after just a couple of meetings, we came to a tentative agreement, which the union has since ratified. So in front of you tonight is a long contract. I'll go through some of the main changes, and if you have any questions, feel free to stop me along the way. The new term for the agreement is expected to last until March 30th, 2026. A couple of changes this time around. We asked for the probationary period for new employees to be changed from 6 to 12 months, and that is mainly because Public Works Division sees all seasons, and there's different types of work to be done all seasons throughout the year. So whenever we bring a new employee on staff, we want to make sure that they're capable of performing in all elements and completing all tasks, snow plowing, weed pickup, and some of the work in the summer. So that was a change that we proposed and the union agreed to. We made some minor changes to the sick leave and vacation scheduling language just to allow more flexibility for village employees who want to take some time off. It's simply just a quick language change that allows an individual to take smaller increments than the current requirement, which is 2-hour increments, if it makes sense to the superintendent. Good example of that is if an employee has a doctor's appointment at the end of the day, we'd like to let them take that appointment instead of burning the 2 hours that are required. It makes sense operationally for us. Salaries and wages are set as follows. On April 1, 2023, there's a 3% increase. On April 1, 2024, there's a 3% increase. And on April 1, 2025, a 2.5% increase. And this is consistent with the contracts we've just recently settled with the patrol officers and the sergeants in the MAP units. There is a small market adjustment. There's a good-sized market adjustment for 2023 for the Step 1, Step 3, Step 5, and Step 7 plus employees. And that is to make sure that we're more competitive in the market. When we look at our wages every time we do contract negotiations, we want to make sure that we are comparable to communities that are like us in terms of what we're paying. And so those market adjustments for us make sense to keep us competitive. We also used to have a Step 10 step for our MJ1 position, but we since lowered that to a Step 7 step because, again, we saw that 10-year maintenance journeyman 1 positions, the pay was not as competitive as it was in other communities. So the change to 7 years made sense to both sides. And then there's just some additional language that was added into the overtime side letter to discuss employees who respond to overtime when they're not on call. Nothing significant, just a reminder that overtime is part of employment. So that's the gist of the contract. If you have any questions, let me know, but it's in front of you tonight for consideration. And again, the union has ratified it, so if the village board decides to approve this, it will be ratified by both parties.
Well, thank you for all the work that you and staff went into to get this done pretty efficiently. I know it went on for a while, but it was much quicker than it could have been. You and Jill and the rest of the team, so thank you.
All right, and we also have a second.
Yes, my next status report is resolution number 23-2759. It's approving and authorizing the execution of a second addendum to the employment agreement to be entered into between village manager, with the village and village manager Ellen J. Baer. I can speak for the board. We couldn't be more pleased with the skills and ability provided by village manager Ellen Baer. She is the consummate professional in every way. She's always pleasant, always available, and always astute. So we have, will be on the omnibus, and the specific terms of the addendum. The village manager bear's contract already provides for multi-year terms extending through the second monthly board meeting of May of 2025. The new annual base salary will include a 4.25% salary increase, which is an additional $7,222.88 to adjust the annual salary to $177,172.88. And there's also an increase in the deferred compensation to $8,000, bringing the total compensation package to $185,172.88. The 4.25% increase and the new salary level will be retroactive to September 27, 2023. We heard about all these millions of dollars that we will be spending, but this is money that is very well earned and very well deserved. And I thank you for allowing us to present you the second addendum. That'll be on the omnibus in a few minutes.
Thank you. The next status report is one for me, just in terms of our Transportation and Safety Commission. We have a few reappointments, so not unlike the Plan Commission that we brought up previously that's already on the omnibus. This is as well, and this is the includes the reappointment of John Brooks, Thomas Kelly, and Jose Venegas as members of that commission. That's for a 3-year term to expire in July 2026. And then also the reappointment of William Swanson as a member of the same commission for a 3-year term to expire in December 2025. And that is included on the omnibus as well. And each of you previously received emails with their resume or CV information on those. Okay. All right. With that, then let's move on to our omnibus voting procedure. The Illinois state statute allows a municipality to collectively vote on a group of ordinances, resolutions, and other motions, such as awards of contract, appointments, etc. This is known as an omnibus vote. All the items contained on the omnibus vote list have been previously discussed by the President and Board of Trustees on at least one occasion and often on several occasions. By placing them on the omnibus vote list, a single vote may be taken to approve them. A trustee may remove any item from the list and have it discussed and voted on separately prior to the omnibus vote. Is there any such request this evening? All right. Very good. Then Trustee Terrell.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd move that the following ordinances, resolutions, and motions as contained on the meeting agenda for October 23rd, 2023 be adopted and or approved under an omnibus vote. Agenda item number 1, approval of the meeting minutes of September 25, 2023 and October 9th, 2023 as read. Agenda item number 2, ordinance number 23-3147, approving budget amendment, transfer over $10,000 to the fiscal year 2023 operating budget in the Capital Improvement Fund and the Water and Sewer Fund. Agenda item number 3, ordinance number 23-3148, authorizing the disposal of surplus personal property owned by the Village of Western Springs, that's Public Works lunchroom chairs. Agenda item number 4, ordinance number 23-3149, amending subsection 5-53, preservation, and subsection 5-55, permit requirements generally, of Chapter 5, it's trees and shrubs, of Title 5, Public Health and Safety, of the Western Springs Municipal Code relative to updating certain provisions of the Urban Forest Management Plan to conform to the Tree City USA ordinance requirements. Agenda item number 5, resolution number 23-2754, approving and adopting amendments to the Urban Forest Management Plan and to add village insurance requirements for guidance on urban forestry issues with the Village of Western Springs. Agenda item number 6, resolution number 23-2755, authorizing and approving the execution of an agreement entered into between the Village of Western Springs and Sikich LLP for auditing services for the fiscal year 2023. Agenda item number 7, resolution number 23-2756, approving the regular meeting schedule for the 2024 calendar year of the President and Board of Trustees of the Village of Western Springs. Agenda item number 8, resolution number 23-2757, approving and authorizing a license agreement for fire department and police department training exercises at private structure property. Agenda item number 9, resolution number 23-2758, authorizing and approving a labor agreement between the Village of Western Springs and Teamsters Local 700. Term October 23rd, 2023 through March 31st of 2026. Agenda item number 10, resolution number 23-2759, approving and authorizing the execution of a second addendum to employment agreement to be entered into with Village Manager Ellen J. Bear. Agenda item number 11, motion to waive the competitive bidding process in lieu of purchase via Sourcewell Cooperative Procurement Program of one 2023 John Deere 3720 tractor for delivery in 2023 in an amount not to exceed $44,948.66, Sourcewell Purchasing Co-op Contract 031121-DACN, and one 2024 Western Star 47X single axle chassis dump truck and upfitting dump body, hydraulics, electrical vehicle for delivery in 2024 in an amount not to exceed $251,531 Sourcewell Purchasing Co-op Contract 06222-VCM. Agenda item number 12, motion to waive the competitive bidding process in lieu of solicitation of proposals and award a contract to Calumet City Plumbing of Calumet City, Illinois for the hydrant and valve replacement project, a 6-inch easy valve installation at 49th Street and Central Avenue, 4-inch easy valve installation at 47th Street and Woodland Avenue, and an 8-inch easy valve installation at Grand Avenue and Burlington Avenue in an amount not to exceed $27,785. And motion, agenda item number 13, motion to approve the following reappointments and appointments. A, reappointment of Peter Glimko as Chair of the Plan Commission for a 3-year term to expire in December 2025. B, appointment of Steve Winnegar as member of the Plan Commission for a 3-year term to expire in October 26. C, reappointment of John Brooks, Thomas Kelly, and Jose Venegas as members of the Transportation and Safety Commission for a 3-year term to expire in July of 2026. And D, reappointment of William Swanson as a member of the Transportation and Safety Commission for a 3-year term to expire in December 2025.
Thank you very much for all of that, Trustee Terrell. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other questions? All right, if not, may we have a roll call vote?
Yes, President Rudolph. Trustee Bacon.
Aye.
Trustee Chen.
Aye.
Trustee Fink.
Aye.
Trustee Naraki.
Aye.
Trustee Lewis.
Aye.
Trustee Terrell.
Aye.
The ordinances, resolutions, and motions contained in the agenda of October 23rd, 2023 are hereby adopted or approved.
And the mayor. Oh, I'm sorry. President Rudolph.
I also say aye. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Very good. Moving on then to our reports, and we'll begin with our monthly financial report. Trustee Chen.
Okay, thank you, President Rudolph. All the trustees have received a copy of the September monthly report. I'm just going to call out a couple items. The general fund maintained a surplus at the end of September, mainly due to the collection of motor vehicle license fees and other taxes. Revenues have been in line with the budget. Expenditures have been slightly lower than expected, mostly due to position vacancies throughout the year. Okay, the water sewer fund. Consumption billed in September, the period covering June 15th, 2023 to August 15th, 2023, was 15% lower than the consumption billed in 2022 for the same period. Year-to-date consumption is approximately 2.18% higher than the same period in 2022. The expenditures include an encumbrance in the amount of $1,738,670 for the meter changeout program, which began in August. And lastly, the police pension fund. In September, the police pension fund posted realized and unrealized losses of negative 2.92%, and maintained a trailing 12-month return of 11.59% at the end of September. The market value of the police pension portfolio decreased to approximately $780 million, with an additional $845,000 of cash. Investment opportunities for the operating funds have remained strong as the Federal Reserve rates remain high. The IMET Convenience Fund average daily yield was 4.83% in September. And unless there's any questions, I make a motion to accept the September 2023 financial report.
I'll second.
All right, very good. May we have a roll call vote?
Trustee Awaken.
Aye.
Trustee Chen.
Aye.
Trustee Fink.
Aye.
Trustee Lewis.
Aye.
Trustee Naraki.
Aye.
Trustee Terrell.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Very good, thanks very much. Moving on to my report, I just wanted to report out and acknowledge the just terrific event that occurred on a rainy Saturday morning, October 14th, where with the Illinois Tollway Commission, they named our pedestrian bridge the Alice Fitch Gallagher Memorial Bridge. It was a terrific event and way to honor Alice. Her family was there, which was terrific. Again, everybody was out there standing in the rain. We had many of our neighboring community mayors and other officials there. We had Senator Glowiak Hilton was there in attendance. Former Minority Leader Jim Durkin was there as well. And again, many of our surrounding communities. It was quite crowded under the tents. We really appreciated the Tollway Commission and their efforts, and also in putting together the event. And I haven't yet seen the signs, but they had them there at the event. And again, I think it's just a terrific way to honor and commemorate Alice. It was something that was really important to her, and her work on the tollway was also really important to her. So it just, to me, couldn't be just a nicer way to honor her. So thanks to everybody on staff who helped put all of that together, our public works and everybody who got it set up. And thank you all. It was really, really a lovely event. And with that, Manager Bear, to you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of items. I wanted to mention that leaf collection begins in the village today. There's information online with all of the details, but most of you have been through this before. It does begin today, and residents may start moving leaves from the back to the front and along the curb line. We do ask that everybody be a good neighbor, and when rain is expected, to make sure that the curb is clear and keeping those inlets, storm inlets, open to prevent any street flooding. I also wanted to mention that there is a coffee with first responders planned for this Thursday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at Starbucks at 47th and Gilbert. Members of our police and fire departments will be there greeting the public and sharing a cup of coffee and maybe some treats, right, Chief? Yeah? So anybody is welcome. We hope people will come out and say hello. And the last thing I wanted to mention tonight is that we are participating with the Pumpkin Smash again this year on November 4th from 9 to noon at St. John of the Cross parking lot. That is where people can come and compost their Halloween pumpkins. We have quite a huge group of volunteers that come out every year from the green teams of the area. We have folks from First Congregational Church and St. John of the Cross green teams, as well as some of the high school kids come out and volunteer. So it's a really nice event. And everyone is welcome to bring their pumpkins. They have to be food decorations. There's more information on our website about that. But if you can't make it to that, I just want to mention that you may also compost your pumpkins as organic material in brown paper craft bags at the curb. LRS will take them with a single sticker on the bag, and pumpkins are organic, so you can certainly compost them in your backyards as well. So lots of options for getting those Halloween pumpkins taken care of. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Attorney Jerusik.
No report tonight.
Okay, very good. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting this evening.
I would have motion to adjourn tonight's village board meeting.
I'll second.
All right, everyone in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Yay. We never have a report late. Rarely.
Things have been
Rarely.
quiet.